You are listening to the Go Get Them show. This is a discussion that inspires entrepreneurs to pursue their passion to create meaningful, impactful, and sustainable companies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This is your host, Arun Krishnakumar, together with my co-hosts, Maxon T and Sheila Mburu. We sit down with entrepreneurs, operators, and investors across frontier markets to discover their experiences, lessons learned, and how they make an impact so you can too.
Last year, we've had 0 defaults. So that's something that we're quite proud of, to say the loan book performance has been fantastic. And I think a key part of that.
We do pre-A, getting back to your question. It is heavily a strategy that's a little bit more unique. We do about one of those a year.
Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Go Get Them. I'm Arun Krishnakumar, and here we are with the team at Zetl to discuss innovation and impact in Asia. We have 2 guests here. One is Shan, who is the founder of Zetl, the Fintech in Asia, and we also have Jazel from his team, who is the first full-time hire that Zetl have made, and she's a programmer at Zetl. So let me quickly touch upon their backgrounds. Let me first start with Shan. Shan is currently based out of Hong Kong. He's worn multiple hats in his last 13 years of his career. He's worked at a fintech called Seed Alpha. He's been part of a very crazy initiative where he's launched 12 startups in 12 months. And I really want to touch upon that as well, Shan, at some point in this conversation. We also want to understand how he got into being the CEO at Zetl and also manages his role at Chief Investment Officer at Node Capital. It's a crypto fund. So we're going to be talking about all that. And Jazel is currently based out of Philippines, and she is the first full-time hire at Zetl. She's worked for a good part of the last decade as a programmer across several organizations, and currently plays the role of the front-end engineer at Zetl. Thanks both for making time for us.
No problem.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Super. So let's jump into it straight. I want to first start with Jazel. So being a woman, I would really say you even could feature on the Guinness Book of World Records for being the first full-time hire at a fintech firm, right? I mean, that doesn't happen. You may be 1 in a million, actually. So tell us a little bit about how you chose a career in programming and what inspired you to join Zetl.
Actually, a career in programming for me is just, by chance, just happened by chance. I was offered a scholarship from before, and I guess I just chose the hardest most challenging thing rather. Sorry, in the list of courses that I could take. So it started from there, and then so yeah, it wasn't really that I chose programming because I wanted to be the first woman who could code well in class or so. It just really happened in my case.
Sure. And how did the Zetl journey start? How did it happen?
So for Zetl, to be honest, I wasn't really, I'm also not really that passionate with fintech. For me, I was just looking for another gig. But I had some basic understanding with personal finance. I had some understanding with stocks and stuff. So for me, I thought that would be okay to begin with. But when I started with Zetl, I quickly realized that I had a lot of things that I didn't know with finance. But thankfully, the team at Zetl is very helpful. Sean was really great. Matt and Mark, they're really great at giving me suggesting books to read so that we can catch up and not be too lost in the finance world. But at the end of the day, for me at least, the focus is still how do I help Zetl move forward with what I know to do, which is front end programming. So the focus is still in there. So yeah.
Great, thanks for that. So Sean, tell us about the Zetl journey. What problem are you solving, and what precisely is the solution that you've got, and how has it been received by the market? Tell us about that.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, for me, it was really a quite a personal journey, because I myself, as an entrepreneur, have faced this exact problem that we're solving, and namely that's of managing cash flow across long payment cycles. So, in a previous startup, I had this experience where we had a very large check that was due to come in, and what should have been 30 to 60-day payments ended up being close to 5 or 6 months. And during that period, there really was this struggle to go, well, how do we pay our staff, right? We had about 10 staff then, so similar size to what Zetl is now. And a lot of those staff, they had families, they had kids they needed to send to school. So the big question was, how do we fund that gap, right? And when we went out to try and look for some kind of bridge financing, as a young tech company that was asset light, we didn't have any equipment or collateral that was physical in the traditional sense. It was very difficult to find funding. And in the end, basically, I had to fund it out of pocket. And that was a very personally intense period. And for me, with Zettel, what we're trying to do is make sure that that experience isn't repeated by entrepreneurs in the region, because entrepreneurship is super important for the development of any economy. And access to finance is kind of a critical enabler of that. So, what do we do? Well, effectively, we're trying to solve the funding gap for SMEs. And the way we do that is through a variety of products that mainly use receivables as the collateral. So we help unlock working capital from invoices, from receivables. We can either do single invoice discounting, so this is like a one-off financing, or we can actually provide credit facilities to customers based off their entire receivables book. So this is the way that we help our customers who typically might not be able to get finance from traditional sources. We can help them unlock working capital to help grow their businesses. So that's what we do at Zettel.
So how has the market received it? I'm sure it's early days for you as a startup. Would be really keen to understand, particularly with the last 12 months, the world's been hit badly with COVID, and we are probably slowly starting to recover from that in some parts of the world at least. How is the reception been to your product or your service or your product offering?
I got to say, I've been really pleased with what we've managed to accomplish, because the customers that we've managed to work with over the last 2 years since we've launched, especially over the last year with COVID, they've all been really grateful with having access to our product and our service. And we've had some of them say, "Look, if it wasn't for you, we probably would have gone under last year. Not because we're a bad business, because they're not. Like they just needed some kind of bridge." We helped them get through that time. And now here they are today, stronger than ever. They managed to keep employment, they managed to keep jobs, and now they're growing again. And all that was bridged just by us existing, right? So I'm really, really proud to have done that. And I think the customer testimonials speak for themselves. We're very lucky to have 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. Customers really love what we're doing. And as a result, we've actually grown mostly via word of mouth to date. So we're really, really happy that our customers like what we're doing. And there's no stronger testimonial referral than from somebody who's actually used the service before, right? So I'd say this is a desperately needed solution generally in Asia, but especially during COVID and as we recover from the pandemic, I think it's going to become even more important.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll spend a couple of minutes with Jazel now. Jazel, I want to understand your thoughts on the product within what you're building within Zettel. What excites you? What kind of gets you into work every morning? And if you're working from home, that even what gets you up and excites you about the product?
Um, so yeah, we are really grateful to be able to help businesses, small businesses, to survive the pandemic now. And for us, the focus right now, at least in the app side, is to streamline our onboarding process so that we can um, take in more users, and we can make the process faster for them. So for us, the especially for finance, KYC is an important part, and unfortunately, it's a very tedious part as well. So we are working on integrating our app into different services like Zero, and then maybe hopefully in the future like e-tax, and so that we can get the data that we need in with just a few clicks. So hopefully we make it so that it's such a hassle-free experience for users, and then we can definitely fund them much faster. So yeah.
If I
Thanks
might
for
just
that. And
jump in
go ahead.
here, I'd
Yeah.
just like to sing some praises of Jazel, because one of the things that really impressed me recently was when she took it upon herself to start doing a UX overview and teardown of how our existing application worked. And then she came back to the team and said, "Hey guys, I've just done an onboarding teardown of how we currently onboard customers. And I think here are the different things that we can do to improve that process." So I think that's like really exemplary of the type of thinking that Jazel brings to the table in trying to improve that onboarding process for customers.
Thanks, Shan.
That's very interesting. Thanks for bringing that perspective as well, Shan. So, just in relation to that particular point on the KYC and onboarding, I understand that you are into several markets in Asia Pac. Do you see that digital identity kind of platforms or centralized digital identity platforms helping you with the onboarding? Is that something that kind of eases your process of KYC and onboarding?
Yeah, so I would say that one of the major issues is basically that there's high fragmentation across different markets in Asia. So whereas, even for example, in the more sort of developed markets between Singapore and Hong Kong, there's already a difference where in Singapore, there's much easier access to sort of open data. And that does exist in Hong Kong, but the level of access is slightly different. And the challenge for us in building product is making sure that whatever integrations and solutions we build they actually work in each market that we're in. So we kind of almost have to customize for each region. And I think Jazel just touched on this a bit, but one thing that's really helped is just this adoption of Zero in the region. We're seeing a lot of the SMEs in the region using Zero. Over half our customers use it. And what that means is we can just do a one-click integration there, and that is actually cross-region. So that's been one of the things that's really helped us. So what we're now looking to do is really expand those integrations, both at sort of the national level, tying into sort of companies' house type data, and also individuals' company data. So pulling the two together to try and manage that as a KYC process to reduce the onboarding headache that it is for most financial transactions.
Anyway, so let's move on to the next question. So, the last 10 years for me, of course, we've seen since 2008, we've seen quite a lot of amazing things that's happened within the fintech space across the world. But for me, the last probably 5-6 years has been like more Asia centric. The leaps and bounds that Asia has taken, particularly China, with Alipay and Tencent, and of course we also have India following them behind by about 5 years or so. What are being part of that ecosystem? What is your experience like? What is the vibe like? I'd love to kind of hear that from you.
Yeah, so I mean, from my perspective, a lot of it is really there's just been a lot of latent demand for financial products. I think it's very easy to forget how in the West, where we typically have access to a wide variety of banking products, a lot of those needs are met. And even then, fintech, challenger banks, neobanks, they all have a quantum leap of improvement in user experience that it makes it worthwhile, right? Now, if you bring that same concept to Asia, where sort of the existing access to financial products is so low, credit card proliferation is very, very low. Even there's a large unbanked population. Most people can't get access to any kind of personal credit. Businesses can't get access to any sort of credit. It means any sort of fintech application, any fintech product will make people's lives leaps and bounds better. So you combine that sort of latent demand with just the large population that you have, the large young population all across Asia. And I think it's sort of primed for this kind of big bang in fintech products that we're really already seeing in the region. You've mentioned China, you've mentioned India. other places, large populations like Vietnam, like Indonesia, we're seeing huge growth in these markets, right? And I think that's really only going to continue to grow. And just for the same reason that people, a lot of people in this region, they're just going to completely bypass one layer of financial service product like the credit card and just go straight to mobile payments. So I think there's some really interesting opportunities here to build on top of that, where there's kind of a new way to access financial products. And yeah, we're just really excited to be part of that wave and make sure that we can help satisfy a lot of that latent demand.
That's great. So I have a question around the demand. With COVID, what I find, especially in the SME lending space, that of course there's a huge demand, not just for lenders, but also people who lend to lenders. So we work in that space at Delphos as well. We see quite a lot of demand right through the chain. Um, how do you make sure that you lend responsibly? Because you're going to have quite a lot of incoming requests in these times.
Yeah, so a big thing for us is being responsible in two manners, right? The first is being responsible as a lender ourselves. So our fiduciary duty, our core business model, making sure that we keep bad debts low. And the way we do that is through kind of our proprietary credit assessment, KYC and DD processes. So as you can imagine, a lot of the companies that we deal with, in fact, most of them, they don't really have the equivalent of a TransUnion credit report, right? So you can't just rely on that and make a credit assessment. And that's a big part of the tech that comes in the fintech of Zetl, where we are using our proprietary credit model. We're pulling in these data via integrations to crunch those numbers and come up with our own credit assessment. So that's one part of the process. The second is really sort of verifying ourselves, verifying the data ourselves. So comparing information that's submitted through our application against what might be in a national registry, looking for things like proof of service delivery. Because we do revenue-based financing, we need to prove that the revenue is real, that the invoices are real, that we can verify them. And then the final point is just making sure that we have collateral, right? Ensuring that we have the right kind of security to say, look, if something goes wrong, how can we enforce and how can we ensure that we can actually collect on these? So these three kind of pillars are what make up our process. And I'm pleased to say that it's worked incredibly well, where despite COVID of the last year, we've had 0 defaults. So that's something that we're quite proud of. To say the loan book performance has been fantastic. And I think a key part of that is just how well we've managed to integrate technology into the process. Now, the second part to lending responsibly for us is making sure that the companies we deal with are ethical companies themselves. So a big part of our customer base, especially in sort of this services sector, is in staffing and manpower. So some of the things that we make sure we do is we make sure that we're not financing sort of modern day slave labor. That's something that we are very careful not to do. We haven't come across it yet, but it's something where we keep very keen eye on. Another thing is making sure that we're not doing any predatory lending. So we're not trying to push debt to companies that can't sustain it. We're really just looking to try and find the companies that actually are going concern and really just need it to bridge some of their sort of short-term cash flow requirements. And then I'd say the final point is one of the key factors in our credit model is actually the fact that we take into account ESG factors. So when we built the latest iteration of the credit model, we actually looked through ESG factors that correlate with higher credit quality in the SME space. And we actually found some. So what that means is we can now provide preferential lending rates to companies that have social impact or ESG factors baked into them. And it's not just it's not just greenwashing. We actually have a financial benefit as well as social impact. So I think kind of marrying these two together is one thing I'm really proud of. And as a result, we've actually managed to finance one of only, I think, 13 B corporations that exist in Singapore. So we're quite proud of that as an achievement. And it's something that we continue to focus on, making sure that the capital we provide goes to the right sorts of companies that are providing not just financial return, but social return as well.
That's amazing, Sean. Thanks for that. Particularly excited about the B Corp stat that you gave me there. And I'm glad for you on that front as well. So, coming back to Jasil, I have a question for you. What is it that you would say for aspiring product managers, kind of women who are aspiring to be product managers and tech or programmers within startups? Is there anything that they need to be thinking about? Is there anything that you've done to take or accelerate your career in that route?
Um, so actually, I've been very lucky working online and even working like in an office. I've never been like discriminated against just because I'm a woman. But I would say that transitioning into online work, this is where you would see the statistic against you as a woman. There really would be more men in the space. So, for example, in my case, in the past few teams I've worked with, there would be two back end developers, males, and then I'd be the only girl in the team most of the time. But what I would say is that it's not really something to be scared of as women. When It's because I know I think coding is, no one is innately good at coding. It's something that you get good at as you go, as you practice, as you put in the hours. So, as a woman, it could be intimidating to see the team full of men. But whenever you see someone who's really good at coding, it would be much better to think that, if they put in the hours, they've really done their job well. That's why they're good at it. It's not a male versus female thing for me. So, if you want to be good at it, you just have to put in the hours. You have to practice. You have to learn. To get there. And then, yeah, and for a woman, and maybe as a general advice, to, I guess, to survive coding, I think it's important to, to enjoy the job, because coding is coding, as technologists, coding, designing UX, as UX engineers, we're in a very nice spot where we have to mix logic and creativity together, to solve problems. So I think that's really fulfilling as well. So yeah, that's what I think.
I think the point where you said about enjoying coding kind of resonates with me. I'll make sure I show that input to, in fact, the whole recording to my daughters. I think they can draw some inspiration from your experience. Thanks for that. The other question I have for you, Sean, is where are you going from here? I know there are regional expansions or product expansions. What is your focus from here? How are you getting from here to Series A, Series B? I'm sure you will with your leadership, but how are you planning to go there?
Yeah, so for us, it's really about now, we've proven that the model works, I think. That's kind of been the focus since we launched 2 years ago. And now we're really looking to gear up and get that scaling going, which is why we've just closed, or we're closing now, a seed round. And that really is for us to start building out these customer acquisition engines, to start getting a broader regional footprint. So those are sort of really the two main things that we're focusing on now, is making sure that we can deliver our product, our solution, to more customers who need it, because there are so many out there. We just need to make sure that they're aware that this is a service that is available to them. And really, it's about being customer led for us. So even our geographic expansion, while obviously we have kind of a top down view on what should work in terms of markets and geographies, we're definitely making sure that it's customer led. So a lot of the customers we have, based out of Hong Kong, Singapore currently, they operate all across Asia Pacific. So what that means is for them to come to us and go, hey, I've got this business in Malaysia with 20 contractors that need support. Hey, I'm launching an office in Vietnam. Can you guys support me there? That's really where we're seeing kind of our strategic roadmap in how we're going to grow. And that's one of the key things that we're looking to do.
Interesting. So thanks for that. So clearly you are on the growth trajectory, and I'm sure you're on the map for several VCs in the region. You're definitely on my map. So on that note, a final question: what is that you would advise budding entrepreneurs, particularly in Asia, to kind of keep track of how do they get to where you are. I'm sure you still have a long way to go. What are the things that you see as challenges and opportunities in that space that they should be looking for, watching out for?
Sure, yeah. So I think there are a few things that I would really recommend. The first is making sure that you know how to validate whether the problem that you're looking at really exists and that your intended solution is the right way to do this. And look, I myself made this mistake in previous businesses where I spent way too long just building a technology solution only to realize it didn't quite have product market fit. And actually, this is the reason why I ended up doing the personal project to launch 12 startups in 12 months. Because when you have to launch a startup every month, you're forced to really condense the value proposition into its purest form. And a lot of the time, that actually means operating without any technology. So you're proving that the service is valuable enough that people use it without technology, then they sure as hell will use it if you can provide the solution with technology. And that's actually exactly how we launched Zetl. So before we launched, we went around to different prospects and said, hey, if we had this solution, how would you use it? And then we got them to commit. We got them to sign to say, yes, we would use it. But when we launched, we still didn't launch with technology. We launched the service entirely manually because we said, hey, if we can operate this manually, then again, customers will use it if we provide them with technology. Once we'd started funding customers, proven that it existed, that's when Jazel came into the picture to come in and actually start building out the technology that is now being used to do this funding. And that's really the way to step it up, especially for non-technologists. I think there can be an over-reliance on thinking that technology is a panacea, that it is the solution, but often it's a means to a solution, right? So I think that's one of the first things that I would advise entrepreneurs to bear in mind. Now, the second is I would strongly encourage founders in this region to adopt first order thinking. It's very easy in the startup space to look at what's going on in the West, in the place like the UK, in places like the US, and then try and emulate that in the same way. But often the local market characteristics that make that work in those markets don't translate the same way to Asia. And one very major difference that I've noticed just being in Asia in the startup community for a while is the level of capital available, the amount of funding available is an order of magnitude different. And that changes things, right? It means that the way you operate a startup in Asia has to be slightly different. Now, of course, there are always exceptions to this rule, and that may very well change in the near future. But for now, it's still entirely true that there is a lot more capital available in the West than there is in Asia. So running your startup in a way that takes that into account is very, very important, and not just emulating what you see other startups doing in the West, I think is very, very critical. And then I'd say just the final advice to any entrepreneur is to realize that this is a long journey. The best way you can get through it is to make sure that you're constantly learning, make sure that you're constantly improving. Take this concept of 1% better every day and really apply it to your own skill set as an entrepreneur. Because over time, it will eventually yield results. The key is just to make sure that you're not spending 2 years just to get one learning, but you want to get that learning in 2 days. So the faster you can get those learnings, the more likely you are to succeed.
Right. So, Sean and Jazel, it's been real pleasure talking to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Aaron.